Well, hello, Danny, and it is great to see you looking so hale and well.
You're very kind, and you look pretty good yourself.
Now, back in April, you scared the tripe out of your family, your friends, your fans, when something weird happened to your health. Step me through what happened.
I was walking upstairs from my bedroom to the kitchen to get something to eat, and I fell down, and I didn't get anything yet. I didn't think anything important, and Amy, my wife, came down and said, "You okay?" And in my head, I said, "Yeah, I'm fine, thank you." But she heard garbly goop. She didn't hear any words she could understand, and I didn't know what she was doing until she really panicked and then took me to the hospital, where they kept me for a week, did batteries of tests on me, and again, told me nothing about what had happened. And still, they've got theories, but nobody knows.
See, you originally thought that you were having a stroke, obvious deduction.
That's exactly what I thought. And I kind of got insistent upon it because I don't know how the medical community works. I thought they were crazy. My dad had a stroke, a coworker had a stroke. This was a stroke. And they said, no. And this freaked me out. And I don't know if this freaks you too. And they said, well, if you had a stroke, we'd see it on the x-ray. How the hell do you see a stroke on an x-ray? But they didn't see it. So the only thing, by process of elimination, we'll get there eventually, but I did not have a stroke.
When do you think the medicos might come to some conclusion as to what was bedeviling you?
I don't know, because I think there's probably less interest at the hospital and places I've been. I don't think they get up in the morning, though, and say, well, what happened to Danny Bonaduce? I think they moved on. I keep going to test after test. I'm not letting it go, but somebody's eventually going to tell me what happened.
But the thing is, Danny, you're back in the saddle. You're back on radio in Seattle with Sarah doing mornings. So, you know, your life is now back where it was.
Yeah, it seems to be about back where it was. Maybe I'm a little more grateful these days. Maybe I'm a little introspective, as, you know, it's funny because I won't really do anything about this. I think, well, I'm going to start to eat right. Well, I'm going to start to exercise. Nah, not really. I'm starting to exercise a little bit, but it sounds like a lot of trouble to watch my diet.
Let's whirl back to the 1960s, because your first movie role, I got to say, is something pretty impressive. The Trouble with Girls. That's not the name of your memoir, by the way. This is starting with one of the Hollywood greats.
But yeah, my first movie was a movie with Elvis Presley.
How old were you, Danny?
I'm going to go with about 8, maybe 9. It was before the Partridge Family. It's funny, depending how I tell this story, people think I'm lying because I can tell it this way. I did this movie with Elvis Presley, and he gave me a car. And right then and there, they go, no, Elvis Presley. But there are a bunch of kids on this movie, and he had bought 20 push cars. So he gave us all a car.
Oh, I've seen the movie, and you had that thing called a thingamajig, I think, that musical instrument that you're banging your knees together and all of that.
Drum for my knees, a pedal for my feet. Yeah, it was a lot of fun, and I remember it pretty well.
Is this true, Danny, that Elvis gave you a tour of his dressing room, and there was something kind of weird about the faucets in that dressing room?
All the faucets and a lot of other things in Elvis Presley's dressing room. They were gold-plated or gold. I don't know. I didn't really ask a lot of questions. But they were in the shape of women's legs. Like if you wanted to turn on the water, you had to grab a couple of gold legs and go like this with them. So yeah, that was my first really inroads to, hey, celebrities are a bunch of super weird people.
Looking back at your showbiz life, obviously it was in your DNA, because your father, Joseph, he wrote scripts and so forth. I think the Doris Day Show, the Andy Griffith Show, the Ghost and Mrs. Mule, which I know you had a couple of really fabulous episodes in.
I did. I sure did. That was a great show.
Is that kind of how you got your taste for showbiz, via your dad and all that stuff that was happening at the time?
My mom is the one that said, hey, this is a very good idea. Let's do this. So imagine Los Angeles traffic, which is awful. And my mom's got a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old Danny Bonaduce in the car, driving from interview to interview. And this is not one of the small parts. She had to find a parking space. Try that. So she would get a parking space. She would take me to the interview, where I'd go in and there'd be 5 other kids with red hair and freckles, oftentimes dressed exactly alike. And I would go in and I'd say my lines, and every now and again I would get hired. And so it was really my mom. And I was already in it when my dad, because he didn't love the idea. I was already in it when my dad started writing shows that I could appear in.
You, I know, have been very candid about the fraught relationship you had with your dad. Not exactly father of the year, Danny, by any measure.
By no means.
How did that impact you?
Going around from interview to interview seemed normal, because it started when I was very young. This is just something 2 of the Bonaduces do. So it was really normal. Everything went a little bit crazy when I got the Partridge Family. That's when things started to spin kind of rapidly out of control. It was just not a normal. The Partridge Family became much more of my family than my family. The Partridge Family became much more of what I thought about than thinking about people in my family. It was when I got the job on the Partridge, like that. It all turned to mayhem.
What was wrong with your father that rather than reveling in your success and enjoying that wonderful point where you're at, that he kind of turned bitter and nasty and abusive and horrible?
Well, he didn't turn abusive. He was abusive. He didn't turn horrible. He was horrible.
Right.
And it's hard to say like how I felt about it, because it was like if it was just happening to me, I would say, well, then my dad hated me. Yeah. But that's what my dad was with everyone. If you got into his circle and he wasn't pleased with it, it could get very, very weird and very tough real fast.
And I think he was banned from the Partridge Family set. Is that right?
Yeah, because I didn't really notice it, but I think maybe it was David Cassidy, but somebody said to the director, do you see what's happening to Danny the second his dad gets on the set? He's riddled with fear. And I showed up to the Partridge Family set with, a lot of weird and unexplained bruises and things like that. And so eventually, and this is because of my reaction, my dad got banned from the set, but he also got banned because he was maybe a little bit too fond of Shirley Jones.
That show, The Partridge Family, must for you have been a bit like a safe haven. And then to have gone there and found such love with people like, like Shirley Jones.
Reuben Kincaid, if you will, Dave Madden.
Dave Madden.
My upbringing. Yeah.
Dave Madden became kind of like your best friend and surrogate father in a way, didn't he?
He became kind of an idea of what it would be to like have a father that wasn't a maniac. Yeah. You didn't know what was happening next door. I didn't know that maybe my friends at the end of the block weren't getting beat up by their dad, that things weren't being smashed in their house. Maybe this was normal. And I had a grown-up friend that did none of those things, who only cared about my welfare and my happiness, and that would have been Dave Madden. I was very sorry when he passed.
He kind of let you do grown-up things, probably looking back now, maybe not that wise, but I think he let you smoke as a kid, didn't he, or as a teenager? And
as a kid, he didn't care. He taught me how to drive. All the things a father probably should have done with his son, Dave Madden and I did together.
You think of your character, Danny Partridge, a genius with the wisecracks. He was a bass guitar god. Is this right?
A guitar god? Thank you.
A bass guitar god, but you couldn't really play guitar. Is that right? You were faking.
No, nothing. One day, it was maybe our second or third episode, and what we'd do is we'd read a table read. Everybody would read. We'd find out where the jokes were, things like that. And then on Mondays, we would shoot the musical number, because that took a whole day. And one day, I'm doing the musical number, and David comes up and he goes, do you know how to play a bass? I said, no, I don't know how to play a bass. He goes, well, I'll tell you right now, kid, you don't strum it. You don't strum a bass. You pluck it. I said, okay, man, calm down. I'll pluck the bass.
A great cast, though. Shirley Jones, she became very close to you and you very close to her, kind of like a surrogate mum in a way. What was the real Shirley Jones like?
The Partridge Family started pandemonium. There all of a sudden camera crews in my front yard, and I couldn't go to school anymore. It was weird. Shirley Jones weathered that. None of that, none of that happened at her house. At her house, it was a working mom with 3 kids. Shaun was like one of my best friends. We did magic shows together. All the Cassidys, that was really my circle of intimacy, would be the Cassidy family. Yeah. One time, I love telling this because it couldn't happen anywhere else, but in this life, on one of the Monday read-throughs I was just telling you about, there was all of a sudden a spat between the kids and maybe David Cassidy, I don't know, and a little fight. It didn't resolve itself. And by next Monday, Shirley Jones comes in holding an Academy Award, smashes it down on the table and says, I win. And we all said, okay, the Academy Award winner says the fight's over, and we all backed off. She wasn't a movie star to me, and I knew movie stars. They were on the set, even as a kid. When Richard Pryor came to do an episode of The Partridge Family, everybody stopped what they were doing because a real movie star, a big celebrity, was coming to the stage. Shirley Jones was the biggest celebrity around, and you never would have known it to talk to her. Just her life was normal, calm, and the way she liked it, except she had an Academy Award and I didn't.
I think she's, 88 now and still going strong. You two, I'm assuming, are much in touch.
I keep in touch with her through Shaun mostly. I talk to Shaun Cassidy a lot. But yeah, she's doing just great. And by the way, so is he. He's producing a lot of hit shows right now.
Oh, he's incredible, isn't he, Shaun Cassidy? He was touched with that teen idol brush, much like his brother, but then some might say very wisely got out of that, went behind the scenes and is one of Hollywood's busiest producers. And
when he's a teen idol, nobody wisely gets out of that. You ride it till the end. He saw the end coming, and went home, and he was, what's around me? What can I do? Oh, well, show business with Shirley Jones. And he sat down at the typewriter and wrote, how old am I, typewriter? He sat down at the computer and wrote some great television shows.
You've talked about your closeness with Dave Madden. He left us, I think, Danny, in 2014, cancer? That must have really knocked you around.
I was shocked because I hadn't spoken to him in a couple of years. And so you learn about the deaths of your, family in a way from tabloids. I learned that Suzanne Crowe, who plays Tracy Partridge, I learned over the TV and over the newspaper that she had passed away in her living room. And so a lot of things that's the way I found out that Dave Madden had passed. And there was something about my relationship with Dave Madden and vice versa that people really cared about, that people could relate to. Yes. And so my phone rang off the hook to tell me that Dave Madden was gone. And probably at that point, the closest person I knew that had passed away, I didn't know any people that died. And I was just gobsmacked by it.
Do you look back at those Partridge Family episodes, especially those where you and Dave are interacting, which is like in nearly every one of them, Reuben Kincaid, Danny Partridge, there was a chemistry there that you just can't fake.
I looked up to a father in a lot of ways, but he was also a little bit nuts, but in a good and more fun way than my father. I'll give you an example of this. He had a house right on the beach in Malibu. Well, to get to Malibu from anywhere, you have to go down a canyon like this, Topanga or Mulholland Highway, just like this.
Yeah.
And he said, you want to learn how to drive? You should learn how to drive. You're 12, 13. I said, yeah, okay. And I went to drive the car, and I couldn't reach the pedal. So he put me on his lap, gave me the steering wheel, and he said, all right, now drive. And we started going down this dangerous canyon, even with an experienced driver. And as we started to go faster and faster and faster, Dave goes like this, and fakes a heart attack, and he won't brake. We turn around the car this way. He goes bash into this window. We turn that way. He goes bash to that window. And I was terrified. So don't ever get any opinion that he was normal. He wasn't. He was just great fun.
Daddy, sometimes we're really attracted to nutty people, I mean, who wants regular?
Not me. Well,
not me neither. What about Susan Day? Did you connect very much with her? She never really wanted much to do with the Partridge Family, as I understand.
No, she really did not. She didn't want anything to do with it. I don't think that show business was the right place for her. She's a lovely, lovely young lady that at some point said, I've had enough of this. I'm not going to go with Danny Bonaduce's mother to auditions. I'm going to go and be a grown-up.
The Partridge Family bus, the psychedelic colors, I mean, it became an icon. But apparently, Danny, it's now in a junkyard where we're all destined at some point, I guess.
Well said, sir. I actually had an idea for a television show not too long ago. And sometimes I'll sit down and write some things, and maybe a reality show will come out of it, and sometimes not. But I had an idea for a show to find the Partridge Family bus, clean it all up, and turn it into a food truck. And I would drive around the country making food. And I was going to do it, and then I got a much better offer to stay in radio a couple more years. But I thought that was a good idea.
I think that's an absolute ripper.
It's a good one, huh? It's a good one. Oh, there's the problem with that. This is my birthday today. I'm 63 years old today.
Oh my gosh, it's your birthday. I'd have baked you a cake had I known.
I don't know, pretty soon a kind of a decrepit 70-year-old's going to drive around America making tacos. I don't know how that's going to fly, but I thought it was a good idea at the time.
Oh my gosh, it's Hollywood. Check yourself in for a bit of work up on blocks. Suddenly you look like an embryo again. They won't realize.
Here's me in about 5 years.
That's right, the wind tunnel look. It's fabulous.
Yep.
You touched on David Cassidy. You and he were like best friends. The level of fame that guy experienced was insane. Essentially, wasn't it?
I go to Elvis Presley and the Beatles. It's the only thing I can do. Sometimes people say, oh, you can equate him to Bobby Sherman. No, you couldn't. Bobby Sherman, and no, nothing against him. He's a very nice guy. But he couldn't sell tickets for more than 2,000 or 3,000 people. David Cassidy would sold 100,000 tickets to a show regularly. One of his biggest shows ever was in Australia. He sold 100,000 tickets in under a day, and there were no computers. You had to show up or call in to get tickets, and he sold 100,000 of them regularly. Biggest star in the world for a long time.
There was a stadium he filled literally in minutes in Melbourne, Australia.
That's the one. That's the one.
There was a stampede, and I think, as I remember, because I interviewed him, he was such a vulnerable, really lovely man.
That is great. And vulnerable, most people don't get that because he was a big star. David was vulnerable. David was aware of what was around. David could get his feelings hurt. He wasn't like a big, dangerous celebrity. You couldn't equate him to Keith Richards. Things really made him where he felt this. A young girl died at one of his concerts. And I don't think he ever recovered from that.
He struggled obviously in his last years. Were you aware of that struggle?
Much has been made about him drinking, and this, some people said he drank himself to death, and I'm sure he did. And this says something about his character. I never saw it, not once. I didn't see him appear to be drunk. I didn't see a glass in his hand. I never saw any of it. Again, I learned on TV he was arrested for a DUI with an open bottle of bourbon in his car. I wish he'd have listened to me. I'd have told him that was a bad call.
You were in Rome, I think, on holiday when a fan came up and said, "Oh my God, I'm really sorry." And that was kind of the first inkling you had that there was something wrong. David was in hospital and just about to pass.
I was getting my son, who this is really one of our, his mother and I got a divorce long before this. So I was having a lovely trip with my wife and my son. And we wanted to I'll never forget it. We wanted to get some gelato. And somebody from across the room just came up to me and said, I'm really sorry about your loss. And I thought to myself, A, who died? And B, how would this guy know? And so I said, what happened? He goes, oh, David Cassidy, he's in the hospital. He's on life support. That was how I found out by a guy in an ice cream store in Rome.
I know. Life takes you on some weird journeys sometimes. It's ironic.
You're telling me.
I know. Well, I know. You've been on them. I mean, my gosh, you were even in the car one day, as I recall the story, and you heard about your own death.
I was on my way to high school, I guess 11th grade. And there's a famous disc jockey here of that era named Rick Dees. And that's it. When you're young, he goes, and I'm stuck in LA traffic like normal. And he says, and I quote, "The world of showbiz has been dealt a devastating blow." So I listen, that's important. So I listen, he goes, Danny Bonaduce was just found dead in his car. And I'm looking around and go, is this it? Because then he started to play Partridge Family songs. I said, is this it? Is this the afterlife? I'm in LA traffic, hearing Partridge Family songs on the radio. Does this go on forever? So I got to 11th grade, I got to the school, and a bunch of people said, I heard you were dead. I said, well, that's not true.
Yeah, I know, either that or you were having the most insane out-of-body experience.
That's what I thought at first. So I went to high school with a lot of really famous people. This is a weird segue, but I just thought it would fit right here. Yeah. And one day I was watching Soul Train in my house, and I didn't go to school all that often. So I'm watching Soul Train, and Michael Jackson is on, who is a classmate of mine. I'm excited about this. He's a great guy. He doesn't say much, but I'm excited that he's on Soul Train. And Cornelius, I believe is his name, says anyway, goes up to Michael Jackson and says, tell me about your life. And Michael starts, and he goes, now I understand that you go to school with other famous people. And Michael Jackson says, yeah. And he goes, what's Danny Bonaduce like? And Michael says, oh, he's very nice. We're good friends. And Don Cornelius says, that's not what you told me 5 minutes ago. And so Michael starts, in kind words, say that I was kind of a handful at school. And I got mad. I don't know why I got mad, but I got mad. I went to my high school, and I got in the middle of the room, because it's a tiny little high school, this big, that much bigger than the room I'm in right now. And I yelled, Jackson, get out here. And here's the problem with that. Jackson started pouring out of every room. All the Jacksons went to my high school. And Jermaine could kind of kick some serious ass. So I immediately backed down. Can you imagine getting your ass kicked by the Jackson 5? How embarrassing would that be?
And you are absolutely right. There were so many of them. It was like crabgrass, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, Janet was there, as well as LaToya was there. It was all. And by the way, 2 or 3 Jacksons were on the basketball team and were really good at it. All people named Jackson were not a lot like Michael, although a friendly family, but a lot of them hardcore athletes.
Thinking about David Cassidy and his struggle with sobriety, it's so ironic, because you've been very candid about your struggles that, I have to say, has helped so many people. I don't even think you realize how many people, in being honest, that you really help all around the world.
You're very kind. Thank you.
But you're at one of your lowest ebbs, and he basically straightened you out, got you on a tour.
Well, it was weird, because David Cassidy, when people think David Cassidy are great friends, they think about the 70s. And that's not true at all. I was 10 years old and he was 18. What would we talk about? Yeah. So I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and I'd been arrested for something. I used to do that a lot in the 90s, get arrested for stuff. And my phone rings, and it's some guy, and he's yelling at me, and I don't even recognize the voice. And finally he goes, this is David Cassidy. What's up? And he goes, Bonaduce, and I like this because it's a very nice compliment before he ruined it. He said, you're the funniest person that I know. And I said, thanks. He goes, but you've turned into the joke. People don't laugh with you anymore. They laugh at you. Yeah. And I was ready to hang up. Who are you to talk to me? Because we weren't close. And for some reason, he came to Phoenix. I'm a little discombobulated on the story. And we're together, and he goes, listen, here's what's going to happen. Because I was out of work, I got fired, and I'm sitting on the couch, and David Cassidy's there, which is just so weird. David Cassidy's in my house. What is that about? And he said, listen, here's this thing. I'm going to get you a job. And to be honest, David Cassidy was not in the position to get anybody a job. He couldn't get himself a job. Those days were over. And he said, I'm going to go on tour and do some nightclub shows, things like some singing and some dancing. He said, I want you to come with me. I said, great. He goes, here's what's going to happen. We're going to get on a bus, which right then there I stopped. I'm actually going to get on a bus with David Cassidy. This may be, I idolize this guy. I said, okay. He goes, listen, on the bus, there'll be no smoking, no drugs, no alcohol, and no women. To which I said, I'm not going. Why would I ever go on a bus with no drugs and no chicks and David Cassidy? So he said, here's what's going to happen. He said, we're going to go around. I want you to do all the press for the show, which I thought was laziness at first, because it's all morning radio shows that I'd be doing. He said, we're going to go around. You're going to do the press. And I promise you this, Danny, by the end of that tour, you're going to have a job. And I said, well, all right. About halfway through it, offers were coming in left and right. They said, you're doing such a good job with David Cassidy. Why don't you come to our radio station? And I did, and I went in, and I got a job right then and there doing morning radio, which I'd never done before. It was a big deal. And I owe all that to David Cassidy. He really was, you can say, kindly enough, well, I helped a lot of people. You hear about it and think, David Cassidy held my hand and dragged me into being all right. And that was a big deal. I'll never forget him for it.
Why do you think you were brought together like that? Because considering the goodness that came from that phone call, it was almost like it was meant to be, don't you think?
I truly believe it was meant to be. And I was suspicious at first because you got to remember or maybe you don't even know this, remember, when David called me, I was the hottest ticket in town, except it was just a bad ticket. Nobody wanted to talk to me about anything good. I just, I'd been arrested for drugs. I got in a bad fight. It was all a nightmare. So I'm on the top of everybody's radar, and David is not. And I thought, how is he going to use this to help himself? Because like I said, I grew to love with that guy, but I didn't really know him until all this happened. And that's when I thought, oh my God, he's really doing this out of the kindness of himself. I don't see how this helps David Cassidy. Everybody, you talk to me, Dave, they're all going to say, oh, David Cassidy, what a great guy. But nobody really saw that till I saw it. What are you doing in my house saying you're going to get me a job? The guy that sold 100,000 tickets in Melbourne's in my living room. And he's telling me to straighten up. And that's the funny thing. He's yelling at me to straighten up. Well, David Cassidy's maybe this tall and 125 pounds. And I thought, if you're starting a fight with me, you're going to lose drastically. You should shape it. And finally it dawned on me, he's telling the truth. He wants you to straighten up. He's going to help you get a job, which he did.
Yes. You later learned from his brother Shaun just how much he really loved and respected you, didn't you?
I did. He often called me the brother he never had, which is very, very sweet. But then I thought about, you have brothers. Why are you telling me I'm the brother you never had? But like most families, the Cassidys had their problems. They weren't all lovey-dovey. They weren't the Partridge Family. They weren't the Brady Bunch. He was David Cassidy, and everybody else wasn't. And apparently that led to some big fights.
I know this might seem odd, Danny, but do you ever feel David Cassidy around you?
I will tell you this. My wife does. My wife tells me about David visited her and something. And at most points, I think, well, it's just craziness. My wife loved David Cassidy. It's just sadness and emotion. But sometimes she'll tell me some things about me talking with David Cassidy at night. That's real. How would you know that? So every now and again, so when you say is David Cassidy around, yes, but around my wife, who then tells me what that was like. And my wife doesn't go out of her way to believe anything or not believe anything. That's nothing we share in this household. But every now and again, she said, oh, no, I was talking to David last night. He said this.
So Amy is getting these kind of visits from David Cassidy or feeling a presence or something or other.
No, not feeling a presence. According to her, he talks right to her. It's craziness, I say. But I believe her. My wife is just a straight shooter. There's no showbiz about her. There's no putting her on air. She just says things like, when it first started, she said, I talked to David Cassidy last night. And I said, yes, dear. Because it was, we don't talk about stuff like that. Nobody in this house is getting visited by the great beyond. And then she would say, no, he said he's always on your side was the first thing she said. David Cassidy is always on your side. And then he said, this is not a nightly experience, but more than once she said, David Cassidy was around me last night.
In the 90s, of course, you had your struggles with drugs and booze and
I didn't struggle with them. They were easy to get. No struggle at all.
No, that's right. It just became a part of your life. splashed across the tabloids. Obviously, you're on the speed dial for the National Enquirer and Globe and everything.
Oh my God, Oprah Winfrey was all about us. You know, there was an upside to it. I was a very popular drug addict. It was like when I was living in my car. I don't even know how she got a hold of me. I'm living in my car, and I get a message somehow from Oprah Winfrey. I don't even have a phone. So I go, I don't remember where I went to call Oprah Winfrey back. And she said, I want you to be on my show. And my first thought, because this is before I started doing all the tabloid crap. I got arrested. I'll just go hide my head like a good drug head. And then I realized if I go do the Oprah Winfrey show, she'll fly me first class, which means I will eat. I'll get good meals on the way to Chicago. Then I'll get free drinks. And then I'll get food on the way home. And I told her the first show, I said, you know, the coolest thing in the whole world is I came to Chicago. I'm at the Ambassador Hotel, and anything I want, I can just sign your name. And she goes, well, that's very nice. I said, no, it's not. They sell stereos in the gift shop. And she thought, that's kind of cool. And then she started having me on relatively frequently.
I just wondered, did the tabloids get those stories right, Danny, or are they kind of off the mark? When they were focusing on you, were they right with what they were reporting?
For the most part, absolutely. You know, nobody makes stuff up about it because I'll tell you, if you heard that I spent the evening with the chicken in lingerie, and you asked me, I'd go, oh yeah, I do that all the time because I don't hide anything. There's nothing I don't want you to do. I'm not doing this with you. There's no reason to do it because I like talking to you. And I like talking to, you know, my Australian friends that here's the deal. Maybe I'll get to come over there again and we'll have some good times. I just like the position I'm in now, and I'm happy to talk about it.
Yeah. You know, you've been very candid about the fact that you shouldn't be here. You should back be in a casket somewhere. Your wife, Amy, who receives visits from beyond the grave by David.
She just came in here and looked at me just now like, are you making me out to be a maniac in Sydney, Australia? Yeah.
No, not at all, Amy.
Cassidy talks to you. This is your fault.
We love you, Amy. But I mean, the thing is, you've been married now coming on to 12 years, as I understand.
Yeah.
And essentially, you know, you should be bowing at the altar of your beautiful Amy because she got you sober, and it was with an ultimatum, wasn't it?
You don't fool around with Amy Bonaduce. What she wants, at least for me, she's like kind of a demure lady until she's talking to me about something that she needs and something that she wants for me to be, you know, clean up, straighten up, be on time. That's one of the many things I get from being with my lovely wife.
Tell me how you both met.
My wife at the time, Gretchen, sat up in bed. What a weird time. My reality show was canceled. My radio show was over. I was in trouble. And out of nowhere, she goes, honey, I think it's my time to blossom. What? What are you going to blossom? What are you going to do? You don't do anything. So she goes, I want a divorce. And I said, well, okay. And I went to Starbucks. You're going to figure out what a terrible person I am at this point. I went to Starbucks. And there's a bunch of people when I go out, you know, some people notice me, some people don't. But I see this lovely young lady looking at me. So, okay, she recognized me. That's cool. I'm standing in the line at Starbucks. She comes up to me and said, you know what? I really liked your book. And I went, okay, I love you. Where do we go from here? Because you want to say, hey, with the guy in the park, there was, but I was Danny Partridge. That was easy to do. Writing the book was hard. And this young lady said, I really liked it. And I don't think we've spent that much time apart since that day at Starbucks.
This is your Random Acts of Badness. Is that the book she was talking about?
It's the only book I've written so far.
Yeah, well, you know what? I read that book and I didn't stop laughing because you've got such, as people watching now can see, such an amazing way with words and such a fabulous self-effacing humor, which is wonderful. It needs an update, Danny. That book needs an update, you know?
Well, the reason I know you or anybody else in Australia was a magazine article I wrote. I wrote it for Esquire magazine.
Yes.
And I'd never written a thing before. And I write the article and I think it's good. And so I call up the editor of Esquire magazine. I said, hey, I'm Danny Bonaduce. I wrote this article that I think would be just right for you. And they said, well, that's not how we do articles. You have to send it in with an agent. And I said, well, that will never happen. Man, I live in my car. I don't have an agent. And he said, well, all right, if you send it in, I'll take a look at it. Never written a thing in my whole life. And he goes, all right, we'll give you $3,500 and you can keep the foreign rights. I haven't seen $3,500. What are you, $3,500? Okay. And somebody over there, a lovely young lady, called me up and said, hey, we read your article. You want to come over here and do like a speaking engagement? And I said, yes, I do. I would love to do that. And the only thing I didn't write was the title. It was called Danny Bonaduce, My Life as a Has-Been, which was accurate, but not funny. So I said, all right, okay. And then I got the $3,500 and 2 tickets to Australia for me and some companion or some such thing.
Yeah.
And I did this thinking, you Australians, you have a lot of money. I was doing a show called Kid Show, and my child is the next child star.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. And I got a call from Australia. It says, we'd like to do that television show over here. I said, okay. And they sent me a ticket, first class, from LA to Sydney, $22,000 for the ticket.
Yeah.
I went to the airline and said, how can I sell this back to you? And they said, it doesn't work like that, man. Just get in the plane. So I got in the plane, and I actually did some really great speaking engagements. And that's how I got this relationship with you and everybody else in Australia with the radio stations and stuff. I owe to that magazine.
That's a story I didn't know. I do know that you're absolutely loved over here. You know you're absolutely loved over here.
You know what I do. Thank you.
But we got to do something about getting you back over here again, don't you think?
Well, let me check my calendar. Okay, I'll be there in 5 minutes. You work it out for me to be over there, and I will do it immediately. I just love it there.
Now, Danny, here is a fancy word. You are an allurophile, which is somebody who loves cats. You've got cats.
I think one of the ways you know I have cats is every now and then I'll be doing an interview and they'll just walk by the camera. Apparently they're shy right now, but yeah, I have 2 cats. And I know it's funny, if you ask me, are you a dog person or a cat person? I'd say, oh, a dog person, until I got pets. And I got to tell you, first of all, you don't have to walk your cat. You know, at no point, I get up to go to work at 4 o'clock in the morning. And if I had a dog, it would want to be walked. Well, forget that. I have other stuff to do. My cats are completely self-contained, and I love them.
Well, you know something, you are beyond a fabulous person. You got such an energy, and fabulous just radiates like a neon sign. It should be on a tea towel.
Okay.
But I love this story, Danny, because you're an autograph bandit. And for those who don't know what that is, you sneak into record stores with a Sharpie. You pick up the story, please.
I will, because I didn't know it was this big of a great idea. It seemed fun. I thought I was going to get in trouble. My wife collects vinyl records. So we go to these record stores all the time. And one day she pointed out how many Partridge Family records there were. And I go, oh, that's neat. Okay. She goes, you know what you should do? You should sign it and put it back. So I did. I did it one time, and it turned into, like, everybody knew about it. I've done it 10 times, a couple in foreign countries, and everybody always, I'll put the album back in a weird spot to, whole thing. People find it that day. People travel. I got a call from a girl from Portland. I said, how are you? She goes, well, I'm in this record store. Will you tell me where the album is? I said, I don't know. I just stuck in a pile of album. But people travel to get that album. It's very cool. And a lot of people on the internet, I'll hold a picture of the album and it'll say $4.99. And then I'll get things, well, so now it's worth $2. Very, people play along. I don't do too much TikTok stuff. That's my wife's thing. But she put an album. All I do is this and say where it is, put it back. My very first venture into TikTok, I got a million hits. 1 million people watch me doing that. So I do it as often as I can now. But I'm going to get caught soon because I can feel the presence of people looking over my shoulder because people are starting to know about it. So I walk into a record shop and I can see them going, don't you sign one of my records, Bonaduce.
I tell you what, you say you're not on TikTok, but you are on Cameo. And so for anyone that wants a bit of Danny Bonaduce energy in their lives, let me tell you, it is a worthwhile investment. That's for sure.
Well, you're very cool. Thank you. It's fun to do because, it says, happy birthday, Rebecca. And then under that said, it's from John and Steve and all our friends and the people at work. And it's like this whole little thing. And I really, there's a whole kind of thing out there, like these autograph shows and Cameo and things that I don't really know that much about. People get a kick out of these things.
Has there been anybody in your life that you've been left almost speechless by virtue of their incredible presence or fabulous star, whatever?
It's some things that I have done, like the movie with Elvis Presley. I knew who he was, big star. I didn't know that he was the biggest star in the world. So that comes later. So I'm in a restaurant called Jilly's in New Jersey with this very rich businessman and my family, and we're his guests. And all of a sudden, this guy comes up and goes, hey, kid, sign an autograph to Celia. And I said, okay. And the whole world stops. It's Sinatra. And he wants my autograph, and he wants it now. That's a great story for me.
And of course, Danny, the news has come through on the day that we are chatting that Anne Heche has passed away. Just such a sad story. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and she had real problems. But the thing about people in showbiz, especially people anywhere that have real problems, they're not all the time. They're not every day. If you ran into Anne Heche on the street at any point in her life, unless she was going through it, you just think you met a very nice blonde lady who was on her way to Starbucks. There's nothing like too traumatic about her except these episodes. She was on a show with Barbara Walters, famous American Interview. And Barbara said to her, well, so you talk to aliens? And she said, yes, I do. I said, what do they sound like? And she went, I mean, it was craziness. And then it went away. I said, first time I saw her, I said, you're that lady that talks to Martians. But she was at Starbucks, wherever the hell it was I met her. She couldn't have been more normal. So he's troubled, but most people aren't troubled all the time. So we're talking about David Cassidy being sick in the hospital.
Yeah.
And his family, as I heard it, was not there. And like I said, my wife just loved the guy. And so she's getting all the scuttlebutt, if you will, about David Cassidy's last days. And she said, he had those problems with his family. And I'm going to cry. His last words were so much wasted time. And I thought about my family and so I liked it. So I had it tattooed right across my chest. Or David Cassidy. Weird as that is, I have David Cassidy's last words tattooed across my chest because they're good words for anybody out there. Think about it. So much wasted time with your job, your girlfriend, whatever it is. Don't waste your time. It's precious. So I put it right there on my chest.
I love that. And might I just say, Danny, a perfect place to put it.
Yeah, yes, it is. Yes, it is. You're very kind. This was very fun for me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed it too. So we'll do it in person one of these days. You and I are on a promise now.
Okay, that's a promise. And you look like a guy that keeps his promises.
I do. Absolutely.
Right. I look like a guy that would get very mad at a person who didn't keep his promises. So I'll come over there and you'll keep the promise and we'll be best buddies.
Fabulous. Love you, Danny. Been a joy.
My joy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Australia.